Hello, welcome to Today in History. It's the 13th of August, and we shall scroll back the curtain exactly 499 years ago. So on this day, wait for this, the Aztec Empire fell. And this is a painting to depict the Aztec Empire. And you can see soldiers in the background, a pyramid-like structure in the background, symbol of the Aztec Empire. There's a lot of stuff that went on up there. I think some sacrifices. I did see that from a movie a few years ago. But yeah, so that's what happened on this day in 1521, in case you haven't guessed the year. So this fall was led by the Spanish conquistador named Hernán Cortés. He captured Tenochtitlán, which is now called Mexico City, after a 93-day siege, thereby ending the Aztec Empire and winning Mexico for the crown of Spain. So, more pictures for you, depicting the horrific events of that day. And that's a summary of why the Aztec Empire fell. And again, for those who cannot see, I'm going to read this out for you. Fall of the Aztec Empire, that's the title of this. So this poster says, conquistador means essentially men sent to explore the new world and conquer people. So conquistador, that's where the word conquer, I won't say that's where the word conquer comes from. But yeah, you can see the connection between conquistador and conquer. And then Hernán Cortés, who I mentioned earlier, was a conquistador who conquered the Aztec Empire. And then the third bullet point here is the three main reasons for success. They had better weapons, they teamed up with tribes who didn't like Montezuma, and then diseases, smallpox as an example, wiped out the Aztecs. So the second one was quite interesting. They teamed up with tribes who didn't like Montezuma. That's quite interesting. I don't know who Montezuma was, but I assume that Montezuma was disliked by some other tribe who obviously turned against him, and that helped the Spanish win the war, which led to the fall of the Aztecs. Okay, we move on swiftly to the year 1878, and it's almost like history repeating itself again. This is a pandemic, and the first victim of a yellow fever epidemic. So it wasn't a pandemic spreads across countries. This was an epidemic which was situated mainly in the United States, possibly mainly in the Deep South. So as you can see from this commemorative plaque, it reads, Memphis Matters as a title, 4E63 at the top of that, not sure what that means. In August 1878, fear of death caused a panic during which 30,000 of 50,000 Memphians fled this bluff city. Not sure why it's called a bluff city. By October, well, comment in the comment section below if you know what that means. Bluff city. By October, the epidemic of yellow fever killed 4,204 of 6,000 Caucasians and 946 of 14,000 Negroes who stayed. With some outside help, citizens of all races and walks of life, recognizing their common plight in this devastated, bankrupt community, tended 17,600 sick and buried the dead. As a result, many of them lost their lives, becoming martyrs in their service to mankind. How sad. This is reminiscent of what's happening today with the COVID-19 pandemic, or the coronavirus, the novel coronavirus. Some people don't believe it exists. Some people think the government is, has an agenda. I just stay neutral, I do what the recommendation is by the government, just so that you don't fall foul of the law. If the government has said do this, you just do it as much as possible, as long as they're not forcing you to do something that's strongly against your will. There's research out that, let's assume that the pandemic or the COVID-19 is real. Some don't. I'm saying let's assume because some people don't believe it. It's better to err on the side of caution, whatever you're doing. So the government has recommended that you wear your mask. Wear your mask. If that allays the fears of others, and research has shown that most adults in the UK would rather have protective masks worn, obviously to protect themselves first, because everyone thinks about themselves first, and also put on the mask, even if you don't believe it works, just put it on so that people have confidence that you're not going to spread some sort of germs to them. It makes sense, doesn't it? So that's my own recommendation, my own personal thought on the matter. As to whether there's some agenda, I don't even want to go into that. We'll just leave things as they are, follow the government guidelines, and as long as things haven't gotten to the stage where they're injecting chips under your skin, that's another point of argument for some people. But even if they're doing so, at the end of the day, most people who are alive today will not be alive in 50 years' time, So chips or no chips, we want a good quality of life. If the chips are not causing any problems, immediate problems, they're not going to cause you brain damage I know all this stuff I'm saying is very controversial, but the point is, at the moment, I think the government guidelines are reasonable. So we should all follow their guideline. We know that they're not perfect. We are not perfect as well. So do as they have told you to do, so that peace would reign. Okay, let's move on to the next important event on this day. Sir Alfred Hitchcock was born. Now, who was he? His full name was Sir Alfred Joseph Hitchcock, Knight of the British Empire, so KBE. He was awarded a KBE by the Queen Elizabeth II. He only died in 1980, so it must have been during the current Queen's reign that he got his Knight of the British Empire. He was an English film director and producer. This is an interesting picture of him with his cigar and a bird perched at the end of the cigar, the most dangerous end of the cigar. So I decided to use that picture. Anyway, let's carry on. He's one of the most influential and extensively studied filmmakers in the history of cinema. Known as the master of suspense, he directed over 50 feature films in a career spanning 6 decades, becoming as well known as any of his actors, thanks to his many interviews, his cameo roles in most of his films, that was clever, and his hosting and producing of the television anthology Alfred Hitchcock Presents between 1955 and 1965. Clever filmmaker. So, let's move on to the next item, the next newsworthy item for this day. It happened in 1926, and that was the birth of Cuban political leader Fidel Castro. It is said that he transformed his country into the first communist state in the Western Hemisphere. So, born on this day, a man who is disliked mainly by the West, admired as well. But, the West touts the democracy as, the best thing. But I hear that the health system in Cuba is one of the best in the world. Yeah, there's a lot of poverty, but children are happy. Children are not saddled with the current conveniences, so-called conveniences that we have today, our cell phones, games. They actually go out and play and mingle with the real world. I miss those days. I miss those days when We didn't have all these encumbrances. You stayed in your house from one day to the next for weeks on end sometimes, But I think the positive thing with the pandemic, has kept a lot of families rediscovering themselves, kept them together, and they've rediscovered themselves. In families where things were really bad, people obviously have separated. Some people have killed themselves or killed each other. Husband killing wife, wife killing husband, or husband injuring wife, or wife injuring husband, or kids fighting. It has its downsides, obviously. If your family wasn't stable to begin with, then this lockdown would have caused more problems, more harm than good. But the point I'm trying to make is that Cuba has a lot of positives. I would assume that there isn't a lot of consumerism, there isn't a lot of greed. Most people there, I assume, will be content with what they have. They're happy. The crime rates, I presume, will be very low as well. Like, I haven't done my research on this, but I think it's kind of common sense that they don't have most of the Western trappings that we have here in the West, and the life expectancy may not be as high, but the quality of life that they live, I think, is probably better than most Western countries. I haven't visited Cuba. I intend to visit one day very soon. So that's Fidel Castro, who was born on this day, former Cuban leader. There's a mystery surrounding his death. Is he dead? Is he alive? I believe he's dead, But yeah. So we move on to the year 1961. Berlin is divided on this day, and this is a picture to commemorate, to depict that division. So as you can see, the eastern part of Germany, so that line doesn't just cut across the whole country, Germany. It cuts across Berlin as well. So this section, the east, belonged to Russia, and the west was shared between France, the United Kingdom, and the United States. Okay, this happened on this day, 1961. So I'm going to read a bit about this. East German soldiers began laying down barbed wire and bricks as a barrier between Soviet-controlled East Berlin and the democratic western section of the city. After World War II, defeated Germany was divided into Soviet, American, British, and French zones of occupation, just like I mentioned earlier. The city of Berlin, though technically part of the Soviet Union, or the Soviet zone, was also split, with the Soviets taking the eastern part of the city. That's self-explanatory. So, the map again says it all. Let's move on to the year 1982. And on this day, a young man called Shani Davis was the first African American to win a gold medal in an individual Winter Olympic Games sport. Was born in Chicago, Illinois. He was raised by his mother on the south side of Chicago, where as a small child he excelled in roller skating. He eventually transferred his talents to the ice and began to lay a foundation which would lead to his becoming one of the world's top skaters. So this is Shane, what's his name again? Shani Davis. So this is Shani Davis for you. Sorry about the late picture. And it was 2006 Winter Olympics where he made history. First African American to win a gold medal in an individual Winter Olympic Games. So he was born on this day in 1982. The event again was the Winter Olympics in 2006. More pictures of Shani Davis doing his thing. Yeah. So we move on to the year 2003. Echoes of the pandemic again. This time in Nigeria, an epidemic, influenza. was highly pathogenic strain of avian influenza, never previously registered in sub-Saharan Africa, detected in northern Nigeria. And that's a map of Nigeria, and the section obviously in green is supposed to be northern Nigeria. The sun would beg to differ today. You've got a middle belt now. In fact, there's 6 geopolitical zones now in the country. But those who are from this zone would probably today refer themselves as the middle belters, or the mid belters, okay, which is this region around here. Excluding this region, which would be current Niger State, Niger and Kogi State, I think. Anyway, we're not going to the politics of Nigeria right now. Just to let you know that, yeah, this happened on this day in 2003. Highly pathogenic strain of avian influenza. Okay, we move on to the year 2004. The games of the 28th Olympiad opened in Athens, which had hosted the first modern summer games in 1896. So this was 108 years later. Athens hosted the Olympic Games. It's a beautiful logo, I think. And that looks like what the gods and whatever of Athens or Greece wore in several centuries ago. It's a fitting logo for Greece and for Athens as well in particular. Okay, last but not least, today history was made between Israel and the United Arab Emirates. So what happened today? The United Arab Emirates and Israel agree to fully normalize relations. So peace hopefully has finally come in the Middle East, especially between Israel and the United Arab Emirates. So this would hopefully have long-lasting effects in the Arab world. There are people who are not going to be happy with this on both sides, not just the Arab world, but the Jews as well. But it's a good thing that a formal effort, has been made towards peace between these two titans in the Middle East. Tiny countries, but powerful economies. So on that note, we draw the curtain on today's Today in History. Leave your comments, give me a thumbs up if you like this video, and do not forget to subscribe so that you receive updates of my video uploads. Stay safe, guys, and I shall see you tomorrow, the 14th of August, for another edition of Today in History. Bye-bye.